There are many occasions during editing that you'll need to scale, position, rotate, crop, and/or distort an image. You'll find these editing mode buttons in the lower left of the viewer. Clicking the button in the lower left of the viewer will toggle the transform controls on or off. You'll know you're in the transform mode when blue dots appear around the image. There are two other modes, crop and distort. They can be accessed from this pop-up menu. Select the crop tool and the cropping controls become available. You know you're in the crop mode when a dashed outline appears around the image. In addition, 3 crop mode buttons appear below the viewer: Trim, Crop, and Ken Burns. But more on these later. Select the Distort tool from the menu and the Distort controls become available. You know you're in this mode when blue squares appear around the image. You can also enable these modes by right-clicking on the image. Select Transform or press Shift-T. There are 2 ways you can transform an image, either directly in the viewer or in the inspector. The most intuitive method is directly in the viewer. To scale the image, simply drag on a control point. As you drag, the scale percentage appears at the top of the viewer. You can also position the image by placing your mouse pointer anywhere in the frame, then clicking and dragging it to a new location. If you want dynamic alignment guides to appear as you drag, click and drag from the center target called the anchor point. There's also a blue rotation handle for rotating the image around its anchor point. As you rotate, the amount of rotation in degrees appears at the top of the viewer. To reset the transforms to their defaults, click the Reset button at the far right of the word Transform in the inspector. As I mentioned, you can also transform the image in the inspector. To move the image, drag on the X and Y position hot scrubbers. Obviously, you can also rotate and scale the image, but more significantly, you can enter precise values to control the transforms. Enter 90 for rotation and press Return. Reset the transform properties by clicking the hooked arrow. The inspector also gives you the ability to move the anchor point of the image, which is something you cannot do directly in the viewer. The anchor point by default is the center of the image, represented visually by this target circle. All transformations happen around the anchor point. Drag upward on the Y anchor scrubber until the target cross is aligned with the top of the frame. Now, whenever you rotate or scale the image, the transforms are applied to the new anchor point location. Click Reset to return the transform controls to their defaults. You can also animate the transform controls. Let's set up a simple animation where this photo animates in from the right side of the frame to the center of the frame. In the timeline, move the playhead to 1 minute and 4 seconds. This is the frame the animation will end on. A technique often used by animators is to set the ending keyframe first because the value at the current playhead position is already correct. If you look at the X and Y position values in the inspector, both read 0, which indicates the image is at the default center position. To set a keyframe for this value, click the keyframe button in the upper left of the viewer. When a keyframe has been set for a property or group of properties, you'll see gray diamonds next to those properties in the inspector. If you move your pointer back over any keyframe, a minus appears inside the diamond, indicating you can delete it. To create the animation, you'll need a minimum of 2 keyframes with 2 different values at 2 different points in time. Drag the playhead to the beginning of the clip. Place your pointer over the center target circle and drag to the right. As you drag, keep an eye on the yellow alignment guides. You want the image to maintain perfect horizontal orientation. One way to ensure this is to hold down your Shift key as you drag to constrain your movement along the horizontal axis. Keep dragging until the image is completely off the screen. Because we moved the playhead and we changed the value of the transforms, Final Cut Pro assumed we wanted keyframes at the current playhead location and added them automatically. Play the clip back to view the animation. Move your playhead to the 3-second mark. Now drag downward on the clip in the viewer. A red animation path also appears that indicates how the clip will animate. Because we changed the transform value by dragging the clip, keyframes have automatically been added at the playhead location. Play the clip back to view the animation. To make changes to the values at each keyframe, you need to make sure you're parked on a keyframe, otherwise you'll inadvertently create more keyframes. In order to ensure that you're actually parked on a keyframe before you make a change, you can use the arrow buttons next to the keyframe diamonds in the inspector. The left arrow jumps backward 1 keyframe at a time, and the right arrow jumps forward 1 keyframe at a time. Just make sure the keyframe diamond appears light gray before making your adjustments. Otherwise, you'll be adding a new keyframe at the current playhead location. To view the keyframe you created on the clip itself, make sure the clip is selected, then press Ctrl V. The 3 keyframes we set appear on the blue transform bar as tiny diamonds. However, if you look closely, the keyframes appear as stacked diamonds. Whenever you see stacked keyframes, this means that more than one property has keyframes applied at that location. Navigate to any keyframe. As you can see in the inspector, keyframes were set for position, rotation, scale, and anchor. Whenever you drag a clip directly in the viewer to change its transform properties, all 4 properties will have keyframes set. Navigate to the third and last keyframe. Just for fun, enter 360 in the rotation field, then play back the animation. Now the image does a full rotation from the second to the third keyframe. You can control the speed of the animation by dragging the keyframe right or left in the animation editor. Let's slow down the animation by dragging the third keyframe away from the second keyframe. A tooltip appears showing you how many frames you've moved the keyframe from its original location. Play the clip back to see the change. Before we move on, navigate to the final keyframe and delete the rotation keyframe. Next, we'll animate the opacity of the clip. Now you could do this directly in the inspector by setting keyframes for opacity. However, it's much faster to do this right on the clip itself. Double-click on the opacity timing bar to expand it. You can adjust the overall opacity of the clip by dragging on the opacity line, or you can fade in or out the opacity by dragging on the fade handles that appear in the upper corners of the animation editor. Since the image begins off screen, there's no point in fading in the clip, so drag the endpoint fade handles to the right until it's halfway between the end of the clip and the last keyframe. Now play the clip back to see the completed effect. Very nice. Now close the animation editor. Next, we'll look at the various ways Final Cut Pro gives you for cropping an image.